All right, welcome back. This episode is going to be fun. I'm going to talk about some things that change when we switch versions to 2023 from the 2022 game. I've noticed some interesting things. A lot of guys changing ratings, like I talked about in the Slack comments. So if you look here on the screen, you can see the draft class. I know someone was asking about that. So if all you have to do is go to the MLB tab, rookie draft, and you go to draft pool, and then you go over the year. So you go to 2029, you see there's 924 players in the draft class. It will finish at about just over 1,000, like 50 or something. So it has almost all of them now. It has all the high school age players, and it has about 2/3 of college age players. So what it will do is on the opening day of next season of the draft year, it will add the last like 100 players that are all college aged. It will kind of simulate guys that are like small school sleepers that are kind of come up out of nowhere and are kind of like last minute draft guys. So like some juniors and seniors that have big years. I think that's kind of what it's trying to do. So your scout identifies them late kind of thing. So it does that. And so if you go to 2030, you can see most of the guys still 743. So that draft class, you can see almost like 75% of it already too, even though it's 2 years away. Same thing with that. As of next year, when we're at this time, instead of 743, it will be like 923 kind of thing, and same thing. And then I'll add like the last 100 players. So if you go really far out, all the way to this year, you can see about 40% of the class so far, which is still pretty good. The ratings change so far when it's like 2-3 years out, and especially when they're that age. But you can identify some freaks. Like you do see a guy like this, and you're like, well, he's definitely a good hitter. Like, but I've seen a ton of guys like this go to like 50 contact and like 45 power by the draft, more time, just as many times as they stay their ratings. But generally, you can kind of identify like the absolute superstars. You can see on here if there's any like shortstops or something with like huge power. Like this guy's clearly going to be a pretty good third baseman. Like I'm sure he'll keep most of the gap and have like a nice arm, be a good runner, and have like a solid bat, something like that. So I'm sure a guy like that will pretty much stay good. But yeah, you'll have to kind of keep an eye on some of them. But I just like to kind of peek ahead sometimes, so I don't look too hard into it at all. But yeah, you definitely know a few guys like this, once they have like a bunch of 80s and 70s, are obviously pretty freaky. So anyways, you do that if you want to look at the draft classes. Same thing, a lot of people don't know. If you just go to logs, you can see the last 5 Rule 5 draft log, actually. I never knew how to do that for the longest time. I just discovered it randomly a couple of years ago. And so that's one thing a lot of people don't know. So you can kind of go and check on that too. So there's lots of stuff on logs that kind of cool. Right now, what we'll do is kind of go the complete transactions log for the whole league, and then you can see who retired and stuff. So you can see a lot of stuff if you go so news and logs, complete transaction logs. So you go to this one, and it will be for the whole league. If you go to this one, it'll just be your team one down below. So go to the league one, and then yeah, you go to Boston. You can see that they had a lot of options. You see Willie Adames is sticking with that contract, which is a really good deal for Boston. He's got like 4 years left, at like 30 years left, like $16 million a year. Syndergaard looks like he's opted into his last year there, $28 million, so he'll be around 1 more year in Boston. And then you have Kyle Mueller opted out. He had a really nice cheap little contract for how amazing he's been. So he compensation eligible, so they can probably QO him and he might decline. He's been so good. I got a little speaker problem here. I don't know what's going on here. So anyways, Zach Birdie declined his option too. He was a monster in the playoffs. Shut out the World Series final game from what I remember. But you have Aaron oh my goodness, what's going on here? Hold on, let me unplug that. Okay, so you have Dominic Smith is going to be a free agent. Aaron Judge obviously executed his contract year. Oh, but then he retired. Wow. So Aaron Judge retired. I guess we'll see that down below somewhere. So that's huge for them because he was making way too much money for how good he was at this point in his year. He had -2 WAR last season. Dylan Cease executes contract year for like $34 million, so that kind of stings. But his ratings are still pretty nasty, so he might be able to have a bounce back year. Jesus Luzardo is going to be a free agent there. Yelich is taking his contract opt-out, so he'll be one of the big names in the free agent market if he makes it. The big news here, in my opinion, is Matt Manning, probably the biggest free agent. He is an absolute superstar. He had a really front-loaded contract. He was making like 36 and 35 million or something the last couple of years. You can see here if you go to history, so 35 million. And so he looks like his contract was going to go down a lot. You can't see anymore because he opted out, so that contract disappeared. But he was only going to make like 25, 20, and 18 the next like 3 years or something. So he actually opted out at the age of 30. So now he's going to be a huge free agent. Might get like 30 million a year again for like 6 or 7 years. He's like an ace on the market there. So that's a huge one there. The big one too for Houston is Asa Lacy has decided not to opt out the remaining contract. That's interesting for them. He's only making about 21 on those backloaded contracts, so he makes 21 and like 22 and 23 million pretty much next 2 years. It's probably worth it with how good he is. He has been a really consistent player 4 years in a row there. As you see, he's over 2 WAR. Dalton Varsho was a little surprise for me. Dalton Varsho had like a $25 million option he just declined, so he's going to be a free agent most likely. Boston QO him too. He might bring him back. He's a lot of really good versatility. He can play like catcher, left field, DH. He's a spark plug before he lost that now, but he is pretty close to that. Really good hitter across the board, an absolute monster with the bat there. He always has really good just all-around numbers. 7.2 UBR last year, one of the best base runners in baseball from a catcher. Left fielder type is pretty special. But yeah, he's just really good at everything. So maybe he'll be a big player in the free agent market too. Altuve looks like he declined his option. He might hit free agency there. Carter Kieboom looks like he had a pretty good year in Seattle there. One of their best WAR seasons over the last little while out of any of their hitters, which is pretty cool. He's a really good player, so he will probably be a big-time free agent too. Down here, you get Soroka exercises contract opt-out. I just noticed. So, wow, that's huge. He's a really talented dude. He's lost some stuff, but he has that elite movement control. Down here, you have JT Realmuto exercise his contract opt-out, which is surprising. Oh, sorry, did I read that wrong? Oh yeah, so he executed his option. I was gonna say that was surprising because he was making like $20 million. He's lost some ratings, but he's still a really good catcher. He has that 70 arm. It used to be like an 80. The ability used to be 65 or 70. So he's lost a little bit of his game. Lost a lot of contact. It was 60 before, now it's 45. Lost some power, but is still a really good runner for a catcher. That's pretty much league average bat for a catcher. Pretty average like defense. So really, he went from like being pretty elite to kind of still like an MLB starting catcher. Still had 1.3 WAR, so pretty solid player still. Really, it's pretty old for a catcher there, 37 years old. Matt Olson has executed his contract year. He is going to make $20 million next year, 20% retained. Really good power bat with a high I, and then Hyera decided not to opt out. So we're not saving Washington too much money there. Milwaukee Brewers had some big ones. Kopech decided not to opt out. Louis Urias has probably been one of the most underrated players in baseball last while. He had like 4.9 WAR last season, the season before. And then last season, he was still a really good hitter too. So you got some really high ISO the 1 year there. He hit for a lot of power, but pretty much consistent across the board. He's been like a 30 WAR player over his career, which is almost all in TLG, starting in 2020, 4.8, 5.64. So probably one of the most underrated players in all of TLG, under the radar guys. Played for Milwaukee his whole career, made like one playoffs or maybe two, but really kind of sneakily been a really fantastic player. So that's another interesting one there. Bregman decided not to opt out, and so did Calhoun. So that's a couple big money guys on the books for Pittsburgh. But Gleyber Torres did opt out, which is a huge contract off the books for Pittsburgh. There, he had a pretty decent year there, over 2 WAR. And you get Albert Abreu has executed his contract here. He's making like $26 million. He's lost a little bit of his control, but he still was a really solid player that had like 16 wins last season, which was really impressive. 200 innings. Really good player at this point in his career still. And then Hudson Potts exercised contract opt-out, but then he signed an extension. That's a huge extension. Ton of money there. Super elite player. $30 million a year and capped off by $35 million on that like last and final year. So he's being paid, baby. And then it looks like Cal Raleigh declined his contract option. He started 125 games for like almost 100-win team there, catcher, and had a huge year with 26 home runs. So looks like he will be potentially extended by St. Louis. They always have a pretty big payroll there, a lot of money. Been pretty good. Keep doing the short-term contracts and not getting screwed over with the long-term guys. Looks like here we're going down some retirements now. So Gratterall retired. Looks like some other big names here. Garrett Cole retired. Colton Wong, my boy, retired there. Let's see who else retired. Canley Jansen retired. We got Bradley. My old Bryson Scott guy retired there. Tyler Stevenson retired from professional baseball, 32 years old. Wow, he's getting old already. It's crazy how time flies. I thought he was like 28 still. Let's see here. Tanner Scott retired, the big power lefty with like 80 stuff, like 30 control. Wow, Colton Wong still around. He retired. That's some money. Nick Ahmed retired. He was still a super rangy old guy. Suarez retired. Big power bat there. Wow. Guzman's a little surprising. He's another guy I thought was like 29. That's why I said surprising, but not really. He's 34. That's crazy. Arcia retired from professional baseball. I always thought he'd be a really good second baseman, and never had a big hole there to sign him. Looks like Semien was still around, 38 years old. Let's see what he was doing the last few years. Hadn't played in a little while. Still bounced around the major leagues. Was a captain there, kind of helpful late in his career. Remember this guy, Kella? He was a big trade chip early on at TLG, involved in a big move there in like the first or second year. at the trade deadline. Devin Williams has retired from professional baseball, only 34. Kind of young for a reliever, for a guy with a big 80 power arm. Abar retired. That's huge. That's some money off the books for me. He really lost his shit. He went down to 25 control. He had a huge arm injury and just lost his control after that. So it looks like he's actually hanging him up. He was pretty much top 5 reliever in baseball there in his prime, for 26 and 20 years old for me. Won a World Series title there, and then he was a monster for me. Just never let up any home runs, and was a huge power lefty out of the bullpen there. So sad little tears shed for him. Tyler Maylie retired. Down here you got not any other huge names that I'm seeing, unless I'm going too fast here. Oh, here we go. Some more retirements down here. Yeah, I'm not seeing any other stars retiring here. But some pretty big names that I went over before. Garrett Cole and some of those guys. Let's see here. Who am I not seeing? Bryce Harper, mother flipper. Bryce Harper looks like I'll be on my payroll for another year. That did save me about $8 million with Abar retiring though, because I cut him and I would have been on the money for on the books for his money. Some pitching coach. I don't know if that's the Edgar Martinez or a different one. I'm assuming that's the old Seattle slugger there was a hitting coach. That's probably most likely. I get some big moves here. Looks like Minnesota Twins were on the move there that one day on PD there. Anyway, so that's it for all the major transactions there. So now I kind of want to talk about a few things that changed radically. So if you look, one of the couple of names that really stood out for me that had some major changes jumping to the new game was the catcher here. Oh, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong place. Prospect Pipeline, you can go by team. And then you go to Philly. So, anyways, you go to New Orleans Voodoo. Look at their catcher. This guy, Jamie Miller. I posted him in TLG. He's a crazy talent. So he went my head scout thing there. 75 contact now, 60 power. He looks more of like a DH type. I can't even really play first, but he can probably play first base actually at 35 range. So he's like a first base / DH, but 75, 60. If he got like 10 more ability, he could probably get by a catcher without getting as bad as, even if he was below average on defense. Guy's crazy. He only had a 4% walk rate and 32 strikeout, which are both pretty bad, but then he had a crazy jump in the new game, and now he's like a 75 contact. So that's a crazy like 20 jump, 25 jump almost. Another guy that really stood out by jumping up like crazy was Pat Epps here. I noticed Pat Epps went from like 45 to 70 contact, which is like pretty outrageous. I noticed Arizona had some huge jumps. It was crazy. Vinnie Mcfarlane is just a monster. This guy was like the best rated reliever in like the draft last year. Until 2080, he had a crazy fastball and stuff combo. If you look here, jump into the new game, went up 10 stuff, 15 movement, and 5 control. So now he looks like is a fastball changeup guy, which is like the coolest guy because they're good to both sides of the plate. So he's a lefty that has high intelligence, 80, 70, and 55s. He could just jump to the majors right now, 65, 65, 45 for sure. And if he reaches low potentials, he looks like he'll be like a top 5 reliever in baseball. Looks a lot like my guy, Ben Morris. Should be an absolute weapon, striking guys out, 40% strikeout rate, and some short season AA last year. Just moved around all the way from A to AA last year. So yeah, he just jumped up like crazy. He looks amazing. Some other guys here. Let's see who else jumped up. The Texas Rangers had Jim Fleming had a huge jump. Fleming went from 55 to 75 contact, jumped up 10 current contact. His eye jumped up a little bit, so he looks like he went from. He was a really cool prospect. I remember seeing him in the draft. He had 60 range. I think he was actually 65, which is crazy, but he couldn't do anything else but first base because he didn't have the arm. But a first baseman that's 6'7" with 60 range is just like a recipe for a bunch of gold gloves. And he was a solid bat. He was like a 55, 60, 60, so really good, like top 10 or like 16th overall pick of the draft. Looked like he's going to be a really good pro. But then now with this jump, he looks like he took that step from potential solid pro to like looks like he'll be a superstar. If he can have 75 contacts, 60 power with a gold glove defense every year, line drive hitter, huge eye approach, he might be one of the best players in baseball. He might like be like on that Christian Pena level where he's just like hitting like 8 WAR every season, fighting for a bunch of silver sluggers and gold gloves and just like a bunch of awards. So he looks like an absolute monster. And then yeah, there's some other guys that have jumped up like crazy too. I'm trying to think off the top of my head who they were, but I'm kind of forgetting right now. Let's see here. But anyways, that's all I can remember for now. But there's some radical changes. And then the last thing I want to go over in this episode is on the rookie draft, how crazy some of the changes were. So I'll actually show you my Excel spreadsheet, which I don't know if I've really shown you guys before. So my Excel list is has everything here. So I have my formulas here. So for my hit potential. So essentially the hit potential and ability, there's two different ratings. One is just all the currents, and then one's all the potentials. So when I do like my hit potential rating, I'll show you in a second. It's like factored in with a bunch of math here. So 28% is contact, 32% power, 20% is eye, and then 10% is void. So that adds up to 100%. So it's essentially like almost like a 1/3 split between the big three, the contact, power, and eye, and a little bit of a void sprinkled in there. So when I go to all hitters, and you see here it's sorted by hit potential, that 72 rating is the highest in the draft. So that means Ben Mathis here is a 72 on that rating is really high. So his current's 29. So if you look at current, some of the older college age guys will have like a little higher, like 35 here. So he's only 29 because he's like a high school first baseman. But and that puts him, he actually is listed as a right fielder. But yeah, so if you look here, I have like some cool ratings here. So the hit potential rating, and then you have the exit velocity, which is mainly the contact gap and home run power. And then the disciplines, the other two that aren't like the contact stuff. So it's like the approach, which is like 65% eye and 35% of void K, I'm pretty sure, is the discipline. So you can see the guys that are really high of like the dark green. And I show the infield and outfield range, and then it has the currents, contact power eye, and then the potentials, contact power eye. And then I have the standard deviation, which is just like how far they are compared to the average there. So if you look at some freaky hitters here, you'll see Ben Mathias here is just an absolute monster. So if you look at him in TLG here, actually, I'll go to the draft pool. Yeah, so you sort by, he'll be up here when you sort by this stuff. So Mathias is just ridiculous. Mathias has 75 contact potential, 80 eye potential. He walked 15% of the time. So if you look the other guys you sort by like contact potential, the walk rate's like 10%, 5%, 10%. So he's at 15.7. So the guy's like a crazy monster. Looks like Jonathan Baddock too is right up there. Jonathan Baddock's a freak. Has 80 contact potential now with the new game. It was like 60 before. So it's like a 20 jump in his eye and his contact potential. So just some absolute freaks here. The new game just has some crazy high rated players. So if you look here, what I was just saying about the 72 hit potential in the old game, let's actually start. Let me think here. Yeah, so the highest guy in all the drafts I've ever done with the same hit potential rating is 64.7. That was Chris Ellay, and then Brad Wolf was both at 64. That was the two highest guys I ever had rated with the bats. Ellay during the draft was like a 70 contact potential and like 60 power potential or something, and had like a crazy avoid K. So those two guys, and then Mathias is all the way up at 72. So that just shows how much higher the ratings are. There's like 5 guys in this draft that are as high rated as any player we've ever had in TLG drafts. So they just added a ton of ratings to the potentials in the new game, it seems like. 72 is just insane for a high school guy. So it just has an insane potential with his bat. Like I said, you see how good of a hitter Chris Ellay is with like 80 contact and like 75 power potential, or currents now that he's in his prime, and this guy is graded out at like 8 points higher in the hit potential rating, so just because his eye is so special. So it's just a pretty insane draft class. So you can kind of see how fun it is if you end up learning how to do the Excel spreadsheet stuff. You really just copy and paste it into here, and then it gives you all your ratings there. It shows everything at the top, like name, age, height. You just go in that order, and then you paste it, and then you just make all your tabs here. So I got my like all hitters tab here, and then it's like all my arms over here. Then it sorts it and tells me what it thinks they are. If they have 3 pitches and they meet certain criteria, they'll get a starting pitcher label. And if they only have 1 or 2 pitches, they'll get like the relief pitcher label. And then there's a lot of different stuff here. Like it shows how many pitches they have that are 50 overalls, how many pitches that are 60, and how many pitches are 70s. And then it has a bunch of like the pitch potential stuff is kind of the same thing. It's like weighted between stuff, movement, and control. And then it has the amount of pitches that are legit. Because in the game, it'll say like 4 pitches, but 2 of them might be like 20 and 25 changeups. So I made a nice little formula that shows how many pitches are at least like 45 rated. So it's like the legit amount of actual pitches they have. And then it shows their velocity and all that stuff. So, and I have their injury designation and the demands on here too. So you can kind of see everything when you go to do it. And then when someone gets drafted, you just kind of like highlight them in red, and then you can see who's off the draft board and kind of go by that. So I haven't done my rankings yet, like in my info tabs or anything, but this is just like the copy and paste version. It just pops up with all this information based on this data tab. And then it kind of has everything here. So the real special thing to all this is like the pre-designation for their position. I made this like ridiculous formula. It took like hours and hours. And it kind of like does kind of like where they're supposed to play. It looks like super advanced, but really it's like once you learn how to do it, it's not that crazy. It's just essentially says like for the pitcher. It starts with like the highest designation, which would be if they are starting pitcher elite. So then it's like they have to have at least 40 stuff potential. Sorry, at least 40 stamina, and then they have to have at least 55 stuff potential, 45 movement potential, 50 control potential, and then at least 3 pitches that are like 45 or above. And then it says for the elite tab, they have to have all this criteria, or else they have to meet every single one of these things, or they don't get it. And then 40 is like I don't know if that's hold or something, and then they have to be that starting pitcher elite. They have to actually have like 3 elite pitches that are like 60 or above or something, and then so they get this starting pitcher elite. So if they don't meet all those criteria, it just goes down to the next one. So it's like a comma and then another if statement, and same thing. Then this one's starting pitcher very high level, so it's most of that stuff, but a little bit less. And then if that'd be like your like 15th overall pick to like second rounders, and if they don't meet that, it goes starting pitcher high level, which is like second to fourth round kind of thing. And if they don't meet that criteria, it goes to the next one, which is like starting pitcher third to eighth round. And if they don't meet that, it goes like 9 to 19, so on, so on. And then it goes all the way down. And then those are all the starting pitcher ones, and then it gets down to the like reliever stuff here. Then it's like elite reliever and then mid-tier reliever, blah, blah. So it just keeps doing kind of repeating the same things, but lowering the ratings a little bit until the very end. If they don't meet any of them, it says not a pitcher. And then the hitter one is kind of the same thing, but it says for hitters. So it starts with like the elite catchers, because that's the hardest position on the spectrum, and then they have to have like 55 ability or above to be like a catcher elite. And then if they don't meet that, it goes to like catcher second tier. If they don't meet that, it's like catcher but not really, if they don't have like 40 ability. And then it goes to the highest elite tab for the position players, which is like shortstop and center field. So that's only if they have 65 range in both infield and outfield, they get the designation of like starting elite for both of those positions. And then the next highest one is shortstop elite, so they have to have 65 range, 50 arm, 40 air, 40 turn double play, and they get starting shortstop elite. And if they don't meet that, they have to have 70 range and 55 arm to be center field elite. And if they don't meet that, they got to be third base elite is like really hard. It's 60 infield range, 70 infield arm, and 45 air. And then, 45 hit tool to be like third base elite. Some of the guys have the insane defense and like a 20 bat, so I added some hitting ratings in there, so they have to have a 45 contact potential too, to get third base elite. And if they don't meet that, it just keeps going down. Then it's like I got a second base / shortstop. So then when you go to tier them into your groups here, like my shortstop, second base, it'll just say what they think they should be. So it's not based on what the game lists them at, because they always list them wrong. They'll list guys at shortstop that have like 30 range, so it'll actually give them the position where it thinks they should be. So it's like shortstop / second base. That usually means they have 60 range, not quite a shortstop, like 65 range, but then close, that they could probably improve and get to that. And then second base to second tier is kind of like the next tier down. And then there's some other guys like non-draftable hitter I'll have to take out. Now they updated my rankings. And then your third base, you get third base elite, third base. Anyways, all that stuff. And then you just kind of sorts them into the positions. And then I show my two-way guys here in the middle, the diamond guys, and then all the pitcher guys, you have them sorted differently. I go college, high school, starting pitcher, relief pitchers, all my left-hand pitchers, all arms. And then after the very end here, you go to your big board, which is empty right now. I haven't done that this year, but that will be the big board. It has everything. It has the pitching and hitting stuff, so you can kind of see, and then you rank them like here. So yeah, anyways, that's the whole Excel thing. If anyone's more interested in going super in depth, you could message me on the side. I spent a lot of time on this. It gets pretty complicated to look at, but once you kind of learn how to do it, it's a little simpler than you think. It's really just a lot of fun once you learn how to do it, because then each thing's kind of similar. So once you learn how to do it, for the most part, you add like one thing I add each year, and kind of makes it a little cooler. Like last year I had these pitching things, show how many like pitch currents they have. So they have to have, the pitch current has to be at least 25 to show how many pitches they have, and then like the pitch potentials have to be at least 45. So this guy shows that has 4 pitches that are like at least a 25, but he only has 2 of them with 45 potential, and then it's like 2 of them with 50 potential, 2 of them with 60. So it's essentially he's like a relief pitcher. One actually is like a 70, a fastball probably. So yeah, you see a lot of stuff like that. And then I like do some stuff where it's like green if they're in the top 30% of like their the entire draft class, and then they get a red box around them like this if they're like in the elite, like top 10 or like top 5% kind of thing. So you just can add a lot of cool features on Excel, and then it just makes everything a lot easier when you're going through your draft boards and stuff. So anyways, that's it for this episode. I've rambled on for quite a while, but hopefully you enjoyed if you stayed till the end. Cheers.